Order the 6 March 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Ms. Lystantis, would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Allman?
Here.
Dr. Allman represents the Roberts District. Mr. May?
Here.
Mr. May represents the Powhatan District. Mr. Everson?
Here.
Mr. Everson represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Mr. Haldeman?
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. O'Connor?
Present.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member. And Mr. Polster?
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is chair of the commission. I'm Susan Istanis, Director of Planning for the county, and it's my pleasure to serve as secretary to the commission. Sitting to my left is Liz Parman, Deputy County Attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I will open up the public comment, and the public comment period is topics that are not subject to the public hearing tonight, and you are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do not.
Okay, I will close the public comment period. Next item on our agenda is the reports to the commission. Mr. Haldeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Policy Committee has met twice since our last meeting. The first meeting was on February 8th. The meeting came to order at 3 p.m. with a quorum present. The committee reviewed the 2025-29 Capital Improvements Plan. Staff asked that committee members submit questions to Ms. Costello and/or Ms. Condon. Answers will follow in the next meeting on February 22nd, which actually subsequently was canceled. Ms. Holland described this year's evaluation process and how it will be different from that of prior years. The 5 projects, a new warehouse, a space study for the courthouse, 2 projects for the Chickahominy River Park, and a police firing range classroom, will be evaluated separately from unfunded projects left over from prior years. Pursuant to a board resolution concerning large-scale solar farm applications adopted April 11th, 2023, the committee reviewed a draft utility scale and community solar facilities policy and a draft solar facility ordinance amendment. Accessory solar facilities will be permitted in all districts of the zoning ordinance. The solar facilities policy will inform the board's consideration of special use permits for such facilities, quote, generally defined as those facilities which are non-accessory facilities and consist of ground-mounted photovoltaic panels generating electricity for commercial distribution, close quote. The policy addresses the impacts of these facilities and several mitigation procedures. The ordinance amendments cover applicability and permitting, the application process, SUP factors to be considered, minimum development standards, district use lists, construction constraints, transmission lines, and decommissioning. The ordinance amendments will be moving directly from the Policy Committee meeting to the Planning Commission's March 6th public hearing, and here we are. The second meeting was held on February 22nd, again with a quorum present. The committee again reviewed the 2025-29 Capital Improvements Plan and the answers to questions submitted in writing. And so I was in error when I said this was canceled. I'm sorry, I got my dates confused. Questions submitted in writing by committee members. Several follow-up questions were submitted. The next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 29th. Pending satisfactory answers to follow-up questions, committee members will submit their rankings of the 5 projects irrespective of outstanding unfunded projects from prior years, and the next meeting will be canceled. And it was the February 15th and February 29th meetings that are canceled, along with the March 14th meeting. That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions for Mr. Haldeman? Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Items are deemed to be of not controversial nature. Does anybody wish to pull an agenda item?
Move to approve.
I wish to pull item number 2.
Beg your pardon.
Are there any other items? If not, can I get a voice vote on the approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Minutes are passed. Okay, I asked to have the initiating consideration pulled, and I frankly was a little surprised. When I looked into it, discussed it with Ms. Lystanis, it ends up 2 things. That either the board or the Planning Commission could initiate that ordinance. And of course, my question is, why should the Planning Commission initiate the resolution when it's the board's policy and it's the board's ordinance that's coming to us for it. Ms. Istanis had an opportunity to talk with counsel, Liz Parmentier, and there is an unintended consequence, which I think actually is to the benefit of the meeting. And that is, and if you would clarify for that again, please, Ms. Parmentier. What would happen if we denied the approval of the initiating consideration? So what
I'm
the,
sorry, could you?
Say it again?
you-
I didn't hear you.
it'll be delayed,
Oh, delay.
okay? So, tonight's discussion is kind of moot, so I'm looking for a record again. Anyhow, not to be flip about it, but that is an unintended consequence. But the upside of it, from my point of view, is everybody gets a chance to really delve into this thing. And as you well know, we moved from the 22nd, from the policy committee, immediately to this with no interaction at all with the staff. Please excuse me, but the staff did a great job in trying to answer all the questions in the short time and going back and forth. But I think there are things in there that it would deserve. We would do a disservice to the community and the citizens of the county as well as the board if we really didn't have a chance to go into this thing by ourselves. So anyhow, that's why I've pulled it. And any discussion on this at all? Comments?
I have a question. If we in fact go along and delay this, I assume a month, does that mean it will not go to the board on the first meeting in April, as is currently, I understand, expected to happen?
That's correct. You have to initiate the process to amend the zoning ordinance in order for you to consider it and then for it to go to the board.
If we
The board can also initiate that process, and they would likely do so at their next meeting.
In other words, they could initiate the process and ignore any input from us if we don't initiate it tonight. Is that what you're saying?
No, they'd have to refer it back to you.
Any other discussion on the item? Scott?
Mr. Chair, I share your concerns about having sufficient time to really delve into this and, being new to the planning commission, I really would like to have some more time to really, make an informed decision and digest all of this information, because I'm still digesting the comprehensive plan and the policy, the ordinance, and trying to just, just try to get the best work product I can. So I would certainly appreciate some more time on that.
Any other comments or discussions?
Would we still have the benefit of any discussion or staff presentation tonight, or would it just have to be on hold till next month?
It'd have to be on hold until you initiate the process.
But it is true that during the board, our session for planning commission discussions and requests, there's nothing to stop us from doing it then. Mr. Holloman?
I feel like I have had my questions answered. I have one issue with the policy, or excuse me, with the zoning ordinance amendment that I'd like, one change that I'd like to make to it, but that could be done in a public hearing. So I personally don't need a delay, but I'm sympathetic. I had the advantage of being on the policy committee, so I had an earlier look at this than everybody else did. And we have 3 new planning commissioners here, and so if, I'm not gonna stand in the way. If we want to delay this, that's fine
Yeah,
with me.
and not to add any more to it is, I got an email and a conversation with Ms. Allman, and frankly, she was left off the mail list and didn't receive it for it, and got it late on Monday. And then on top of it, when Mr. Riberio's comments back to it, she was left off that one and didn't get that till Monday. All of it administrative accidents, nothing, So it's one of the reasons why I think that it's not only the new members, but all of us have an opportunity to do that. So anyhow, any more discussion items, or do I have a motion?
I'll move.
What are you moving?
What is,
Moving to, I guess, table this till next month. Is that what you're looking for, right?
think she's looking for a denial on the consent agenda item.
So it'd be a motion to deny the initiating
Okay,
resolution.
I move to deny the initiating resolution.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, Ms. Isanis?
Mr. O'Connor,
No.
Mr. Haldeman,
Yes?
Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
Dr. Allman. Yes. Mr. Everson, Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Polster.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so public hearing is off and delayed, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we're now moving on to planning commission considerations. Planning commission's board of zone appeals? Zoning appeals.
Let me, just for the record, who made the motion? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Mr. Everson.
Thank you. Okay. So in your packet, you should have received the annual report. And for the new members, this comes out every year around this time and summarizes essentially both the activities of the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals. So we generally don't walk you through it. Pretty self-explanatory. I do have Josh Crump here of staff if you have any questions about it. Did want to also thank him for kind of initiating a revamping of the looks of the report, and it looks really good. So unless you have questions, it's there for you to review, and certainly outside of this forum, if you have questions about it later, feel free to email us, but Josh is here if you'd like to discuss it.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Isanis?
I have one quick question.
Sure.
When you had all the different SUPs and zoning and all that listed, and over the side said approved or denied, I assume that's the staff, not what the commission did, or is it what the commission did? I was a little confused on that point.
I missed the middle of that. Can you repeat your question again?
When you had, you had a list, excuse me, you had a list of all the things that you did, zoning and
Correct.
SUPs, and it had across what they were about, and at the very top it said staff, and approved, denied. I assume that's what your recommendation was,
Correct.
not the commission's.
Yes, yeah, that would be staff recommendation of what the
Oh, it's kinda
case
similar.
was to PC and board.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Sorry, though, this,
Go ahead.
I thought in the report, though, it actually gives you what all three decided, doesn't it? I thought it shows.
It does, yeah, it gives what
gives you
staff
the planning
recommended
commission,
and then
whether it
what
was approved
PC
or
and
not.
board.
So this,
Sorry.
because I went through and
This would be this little, unless I'm talking about a different summary than your, I think the last three columns are PC.
I guess I must have missed that. My apologies.
No problem, no problem. Is that clear with everybody?
It's clear now.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Let me move on to planning commission discussions and requests. Oh, what did I skip? I thought it was the director's report. Oh,
Yep, director's report. Okay, planning director's report is in your book. I have nothing else to add to that. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
questions for Ms. Isanis? Okay, planning commission discussion and requests. Any discussions?
Draft calendar?
Draft calendar,
Oh.
H2. The draft calendar for 2024, 2025 is again in your packet. Josh is here to answer any questions. You are meeting on March 18th for your regular business meeting where a new chair and vice chair will be elected, and you'll approve the calendar among other things. So the calendar is put in there for you to take a look at, and then you'll take official action on it on the meeting of March 18th. In the
Is that
meeting,
a 6 PM meeting, or is that a?
I'm happy to go over some changes and highlights if you guys would like.
Thank you, Ross.
That would be good.
So yeah, before you guys, Ms. Istanis said, this is a draft for your consideration. And then that she indicated at the March 18th organizational meeting was when the calendar will be adopted. Just wanted to go over a couple things, some changes from prior years. So the Planning Commission meets the first Wednesday of every month, so that's the same. We have moved the meeting up to 5 p.m. That was a directive from the Board of Supervisors asking all boards and commissions to move their meeting times up to 5 or earlier. So we made that change for your consideration. 3 dates I want to just briefly mention. The May 28th joint work session with the Board of Supervisors, put that as tentative for now. I think in the coming weeks, the incoming new PC chair and the board chair will discuss any topics or matters with staff that want to be discussed with PC and the board supervisors. So don't know if there'll be any, but we'll just put that as tentative for now. The July meeting, we bumped that up to July 2nd, which is a Tuesday. Didn't want any conflicts with the July 3rd date and 4th of July holidays. If anybody had any travel plans, need to get on the road that night. So we bumped that up a day. And then in January 2025, we pushed the meeting back 1 week due to the first Wednesday falling on January 1st, the holiday. So any questions about, yes?
Mr. Crump, I think Mr. Rogers was asking, what time will the meeting be on the 18th? Will it be at 5 or 6?
It'll be at 6.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'd really like to explore this 5 o'clock start time. We used to hold these meetings at 7. And, I just find that, I understand that's a board directive, but I think that 5 o'clock is just a time that makes it really tough for those of us that work to make it here. I know Mr. May works in Richmond. I work in Richmond, Northern Virginia. And I think it's really difficult for, our citizens to get here at 5 o'clock for those who work in Newport News or Richmond. So I begrudgingly agreed to move from 7 to 6, and I'm not happy to move off of 6.
I couldn't agree more.
Same here. As I saw in the note when this came up, they gave us a directive, but I don't like it. And so if it helps, I will entertain a motion that we go to the board and say that we'd like the meeting to be at 6. And the reasoning is, one, public attendance for that time frame. We have a planning commission that is based on volunteers from the community, so that they, in work, except for some of us old farts that are retired. But it closes in the options for other folks to come and participate, not only in attending here, but on this commission as well as others. Because as I understand it, it's become a blanket policy across. It's just not the planning commission. But so anyhow, I would support what Mr. O'Connor is saying wholeheartedly.
If the state legislator ever made it that we were able to meet, virtually, then that would be a different consideration. But I also find that not just difficulty for those that I referenced earlier, but it is a barrier to recruiting additional people to come forward and serve. So, especially if they have to take time out of their day, their work day to come do this. So,
Do we have a kind of a consensus on this issue?
Yes.
We do.
Okay, so I think we need a motion, and we'll need to be clear so that Ms. Istanis can record that as it goes back. So somebody make a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we not make a resolution, right? I move that we make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that the start time for regular planning commission meetings remain at 6 p.m.
Can I add something? That they reconsider?
Also,
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Haldeman, you need to adopt a calendar tonight. So if you'd like to make a motion to adopt the calendar with, as presented, except amending the start time, you can do that.
Are we actually adopting the calendar tonight, Josh?
Yeah,
or I thought
actually, the
Okay.
adoption will take
Okay.
place at the organizational meeting on March 18th. So not this coming Monday, but next Monday.
Okay.
So tonight, we're just simply, giving you to
Information.
consider
Okay.
information so you could mull over and
I'm
then.
sorry, so when we said it was a director from the board, I just assumed that meant we were doing that, but we have the ability to amend the start time at our organizational meeting? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'll have to double check and talk to county administration and see what I believe a letter was sent to all the board and commission chairs and see what exactly it said. But I know it indicated it encouraged people to move that to 5 o'clock or earlier. So we're just following that.
Encouraged or ordered?
It was a directive.
It
and
was directive.
We had talked about it earlier and noted that we were going to begin that in April after we had the organizational meeting in March. And so the first meeting in April would start at 5 based on that directive.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman,
Aye.
Mr. Rogers,
Aye.
Dr. Ullman, Mr. Everson,
Aye.
Mr. May,
Aye.
Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, do we have anything else on the planning director's report before I move on?
I was just going to briefly go over policy and DRC meeting times as well. Policy and committee meets the second Thursday of the month at 3 p.m. No changes there. Still would have the 4 CIP meetings in February and early March, so but no changes there. And then 2 things for DRC, which is generally the second to last Wednesday of the month. Typically has been at 4 o'clock, and wanted to see if you guys were interested in moving it up to 3 to, one, not only match the policy committee meeting time as well, but also kind of in the spirit of the board, directive, I guess we're calling it, having times moved up as well. So, and then the June 12th meeting is bumped up a week due to the Juneteenth holiday. So,
I'll take the lead from the people who work in terms of the DRC piece. Any comments or discussion on that?
No. Speaking selfishly, I already take an hour of vacation time for each DRC meeting, so moving it from 4 to 3 doubles
That's all I need.
my commitment to all of you. I mean, I wouldn't say no, but if I had a choice in it, I feel like we get the job done generally within the hour. And
For the number we've had.
yeah, it's just for your consideration. So that's all I have.
Is there anything
This
we
is
need to
me.
do on that?
am I the only one left on, who's on my DRC?
I'm sorry, Steve.
I don't think they know.
Is that right? You're the only DRC.
I think I'm the only, I think I am the, so I would prefer to
Frank's
meet
on
it.
I've been on the DRC.
And Frank, of course. Yes, I know.
And so I want you to participate and not have to take leave. I mean, it's limited as it is. Okay, so you've got the consideration. Anything else on this item?
That's all I have. So.
All right, let me move to the Planning Commission discussions and requests. And I want to discuss something that we were going to talk about this evening. Okay? Is in preparation for this meeting, because it was going to be rather lengthy. And as you all know, the requirements that we were going to run this thing underneath were to take the question of it and in a discussion, and if there was some sensing that we wanted to add something or delete or strike through, I'd get your north-south, and then we'd have a formal statement of whatever it is so that she could capture it, right? That was a long evening. So what I did was I took all of mine and made a copy for each one of you as well as the staff. Okay, so I've got my strike-throughs and my changes as well as recommendations to the board on the policy piece. Well, I think we got
Yep,
enough
that's
there?
it.
Is that it? And unfortunately, I have an addendum on page 11, which was to stiffen up the relationship with the standards for a solar farm and the toxicity thing. And I've got that there for everybody. Make sure everybody got a copy of that. And I have one for Thomas also. Okay, that's Thomas's, and I have one for you too. Okay, and then the last item that I have on it, that you were going to take a look at the map of the line where the transmission line was going to go through on that, and then they gave you 2 of them with the number of parcels and inside and outside. And I don't know if you could make any sense of what that meant. So here is something that I got off of my GIS system where I put a rough line of the 1 mile and 2 mile. And then, of course, all of the buffers, all the parcels that are over 20 acres. And then, of course, I've cross-hatched the PSA. And so the point that I was going to make is, if you see in the upper left-hand corner there, Racefield Solar Facility, which we approved and we hooked into the system. it's outside. But more importantly, the number of parcels that we would restrict. And of course, one of the considerations, which is a bunch of other ones that we have. Did everybody get a copy of that? So, all right, you've got what I was going to do with a suggestion for strike-throughs, additions, as well as recommendations back to the board, and what rationale that I had, which you've seen most of it anyhow in the exchange back and forth with the staff. And I did want to compliment at this point the staff, especially Mr. Wysong and Mr. Ribeiro, for the quick responses that they gave to our questions, at least a lot of mine. And I was really happy that we could at least try to get to this meeting with the notion that we could have been able to get through that, but the circumstances changed. So that was something that I know that I wanted to say that, okay, we've got, another month or so before we sit down. You have a chance to kind of go through this, add and whatever, and then, digest it. I will say one other thing that was interesting for me as I went through this process, because you almost had to do some deep dives into the code and what that meant. And so an example of that was the siting agreement. And I really didn't understand it, to tell you the truth, which is what was driving me to the questions. Normally, we'd have a discussion with the staff, and they'd come back and they'd tell us that. And as a matter of fact, what they normally do, unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to see any of that, but comparable counties, and what are they doing for their policies? Well, I ended up stumbling across a recent signing agreement when Prince Edward, where it really is a proffer for money. And so what they got out of it was $50,000 up front. And then over the 40 years of it, they got $492,000. And the amount by year escalated. And I didn't think that was too outrageous when you consider that the Richmond Sun Tribe and the race field had a yearly payment of, I think, $1,070 whatever, but it was about $300,000 that went to the general services. So I mean, that's obviously a plus. But I think the way that works, and we'll figure that out when we get to it, is the county really has an option of 3 in terms of financially getting back. You can get a payment like we've done, or you could have an ordinance, which is allowed by the state, that says you can now charge machine and tool tax, which is where a lot of the county gets its money. But I mean, there are a set of options, and those options were actually laid out in one of the conditions we've had before. So it really has been an education for me, as well as I've had an opportunity to look at the draft ordinance for Albemarle County. And it ends up that our good friends from Berkeley were the consultant on that. So some of the questions that I was asking were actually driven from the process that they went through. And what the Berkeley folks did is they actually sat down with their supervisors, as they do with us, but they also sat down with the Planning Commission and took their comments. And so what I ended up discovering is that on the toxicity issue, even though there was no evidence to that, this notion of let's be careful, it in fact is 5 years, not 1 year. And the other point that I really liked about it is if we insist that the manufacturer's data on how that solar panel is built and certified by a rating agency, which I've suggested, as well as meeting ISO standards, I think that doubly ensures that we don't have the toxicity. As a matter of fact, I ran into one that the material that you use to clean the surfaces of the panels themselves had to be such that there was no impact on the ground underneath there. And I thought that was a nice one, because you figure 40 years and the maintenance and the cleaning of it, you certainly don't want them using herbicides or something like that for it. So there was a lot to learn as I went through this process. Believe it or not, I thought comparable counties were New Kent County, York County, Hanover, Caroline, Albemarle, and it was interesting for me to see the comparisons of how they were dealing with the prime ag piece for it and what the conditions were. And the one from Albemarle I thought was instructive. It wasn't trying to be restrictive, but it said, hey, here it is. And as a matter of fact, I cribbed that and put it in as a suggested change for it, as a suggestion, as an addition. So there really has been, for me, an education as I've gone through this thing. The last thing I'm going to say on this thing, and it's the one that I wrote to you at the very beginning, almost 2 weeks ago, about this tension that we have between the VA law in terms of restrictions by the locality on solar farms. And then on the other hand, on our own ordinances, there's the notion of the environment, the notion of safety and health. And then we've got the landowner, which is kind of another tension that's not talked about. And in that tension, as I probably told you already, is most of the farming that's done in this county is leased to guys in New Kent County and Charles City. And the leasing rate per acre of 2023 was $66, okay? The lease on the solar farm can be as low as $16,000 an acre and higher, up to $20,000, $25,000. And so I am really gripping with the idea of trying to make sure that there is an alternative to the purchase and development rights, an alternative to the AFD where you get a tax break, an alternative to the development, so that, as we've seen at least in 2 cases, families that have been in this county for generations and passed that land down have an opportunity to continue to do that, which is the case of the Sun Tribe one for it. So it really is something to think about on these different pieces and the unintended consequences of what we're talking about. So I offer that as a point of discussion and departure, and I'm sure some of my fellow planning commissioners may have some other comments to make.
I'll go ahead. I noticed on your page 11 that you gave to us, electrical transmission lines. These transmission lines that are shown here, I talked to the Aaron Berryhill at the Department of Energy for the Commonwealth, and he had indicated that transmission lines are the big ones that are on those, like go across the James River and go down the middle of colonial heritage, and the possibility of having any of those ever connected here in James City County are about 0. Those are transmission lines, and the connection, I noticed here on your connection point, you talk about transmission lines. Those are actually distribution lines like you see along Richmond Road that went down Farmville. Just as I haven't noticed that. I sent out this afternoon.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Are you saying that the red line on that chart is not the transmission line?
Those are transmission lines, that's
okay.
correct. But on your, you were talking about here connecting to electrical transmission lines, when they probably should say distribution lines. Because transmission lines are the ones that are way up, and distribution lines are one on telephone poles,
Thank
if you
you.
will. I didn't know there was a difference.
Neither did I.
I found that out, because it was, because I mentioned something and they said transmission lines, and he said, you're not gonna have any transmission lines in James City County. I said, well, they're down Richmond Road. He said, no, they're not. But anyway, I sent out a memo to all of you this afternoon. I'm glad we're postponing it, because my concern with this whole ordinance in total is that I believe a lot of it is not consistent with our comprehensive plan. I have several examples I used in the memorandum I sent you. I have a list of about 15 other examples from the comp plan that would say that this is not consistent with the rural ambiance, the keeping of open space, et cetera. And, it is an industrial use. And I think it should be an industrial land and public lands because of the dump. We have talked about that. I think at the policy committee that came up at the well, I guess you call it the convenience center out there on Jolly Pond Road. Good opportunity for it. I have, just a quick discussion about why I don't think it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think that when we do talk about this, I think we need to make a determination if this ordinance in its totality, as it currently configured, even with Mr. Polster's suggested changes, is if it's consistent for all these zoning districts. because I don't think it is. And I don't think when people said that they're looking for rural vistas and all this stuff that's in there in forested land, they have any concept of the fact that they could be sitting there with, looking at a bunch of panels. We kind of ran into that. I understand that the Farmville one, the people there were kind of fired up. I guess some changes were made and they kind of settled down. But that's what I think, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the whole ordinance, I think we need to make a determination whether the whole thing is consistent. All I have to say. Thank you for the time.
Comments, discussions, either on this or another subject?
I think I would simply reiterate my opposition to a neighborhood meeting. I think to require that in an ordinance is just a little bit of a stretch. You know, I mean, it's almost akin to, everything in there is going to be an SUP, so we'll have a public hearing. So I don't know that, it just seems to create unnecessary bites at the apple to the application. So I would also suggest, and I'll send this to you, Mr. Wysong, but in paragraph 7A, we talk about the statement regarding any site and viewshed impacts under the environmental impact assessment. I think it's probably more appropriate.
You all failed to adopt an initiating resolution, so I'd ask that you not comment on any zoning text amendments.
Okay, that's fair.
Absent doing that, you can go back and initiate this conversation, but I'd rather you.
Oh, that's fair. I'll send you an email,
Okay.
so with some.
Any other comments you have?
Can I just try a general question, Mr. Chair, which is, sometimes you have to spoon feed this to me. I'm looking at Liz because I think it's a lawyer question, and I don't know if it's a red line or not, but I mean, when you have a great comp plan, let's say, it's very clear, and we're going to protect all the rural vistas. How about at any time after that, Virginia itself enacts a statute like this 45.2 role of local governments? I mean, when they're in conflict, do we get to argue our comp plan anymore?
I'm sorry, can you ask
I
that
mean,
again?
I guess what I'm saying is we could say this is inconsistent with our comp plan if it's consistent with a state directive that says you will foster by 2030, you know, this other goal of having renewable energy sources. Where do we make our last stand? Do we have a?
I mean, the comprehensive plan is a guidance document, and whereas, you know, the state code is mandated. So that's where I would fall on that. Of course, you know, that's a nuanced discussion, so that would probably require some more thought. But yeah, again, the comp plan is not law, it's not code, it's a guidance document.
I commented to one of my other planning commission meetings that there was an RFP that was released and was closed, I think, the 4th of March, and it was to redo the strategic plan that we had almost 7 years ago. And the reason I brought that up is for exactly the point that kind of Steve's talking about is how do you bridge from something that is aspirational, which is what I think that the comp plan is on that, to a execution of those things that you want to do, and then get it into a budget. And one of the things that I think we accomplished when we did the strategic plan the last time that involved the entire community is they actually came up with priorities based on the aspirations of the comp plan. And of course, we've revived the comp plan, and as a matter of fact, one of the things that we did is we actually prioritized the goals, strategies, and actions in that comp plan. And I think the thought was, at least on my part, was that you would have a basis then that when you did the strategic plan, you had a bridge to say, okay, what are those things that, you know, because you can't do everything, right? You can't afford everything, how to do that. So I think it's going to be kind of interesting year. I think there's a 12 or 14 month performance factor on that thing with a bunch of town halls. But I think that's another way that will inform us about moving from one to the other. Any other comments for discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
What did you move?
To
Adjourn the meeting. Okay, I'm sorry.
I mean,
We
I'm
have it,
agreeing with
we
you,
have it on,
Frank.
we have it on the floor.
No, it can be a voice vote.
Voice vote, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.